CEO, was enjoying dinner. Then 3 kids gave him a letter that left him speechless. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Truth Untold Story. Which country are you watching this video from? If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for more emotional stories every day. The winter air outside howled like a restless spirit, slipping through alleys and between buildings as if searching for someone to cling to. New York City was alive as always. Taxis honked impatiently, neon signs flickered above packed sidewalks, and steam curled from subway grates like breath from the city itself. But inside Willow and Oak, the chaos melted into quiet elegance. Dim pendant lights hung above each polished oak table, casting a warm amber hue across white linens and crystal glasses. Jazz hummed from the speakers, soft and nostalgic, as if trying to soothe whatever weariness people had brought in with them. In the far corner, seated by the tall windows overlooking Fifth Avenue, was Daniel Carter, alone, deliberate, and entirely unreadable. His dark navy suit fit him like armor, sharp and impeccable. Cufflinks gleamed beneath his coat sleeves. His Rolex caught the light with every subtle movement of his wrist. His silver-streaked hair was neatly styled, not a strand out of place. He was a man who had learned long ago how to control rooms, how to command attention with silence, how to enter a board meeting and shift the energy before saying a word. Tonight, though, he didn't want to be noticed. He sipped slowly from a glass of Balvenie 21, eyes scanning the room without really seeing it. A plate of untouched oysters rested in front of him. The waiter had offered to bring something more, but Daniel had waved him off politely. He wasn't there for the food, or the scotch, or even the atmosphere. This was his ritual. Twice a month, always on a Thursday, he'd book that same corner table, show up alone and stay until the lights dimmed for closing. Not because he needed a break, but because it was the only time he felt like he could breathe. Years of success had brought him everything: 2 homes on opposite coasts, a private jet, luxury cars, and a face familiar to anyone who read Forbes or TechCrunch. And yet, despite the accolades and the empire he'd built from scratch, Daniel Carter felt like a stranger in his own story. He glanced toward the window beside him. Frost patterned the edges of the glass. Beyond it, pedestrians rushed past in thick coats, couples laughed under bundled scarves, and cab lights streaked across the wet pavement like fireflies in the dark. For a moment, he imagined being one of them, someone anonymous, someone who didn't have assistants, or investors, or legal teams waiting on his next decision, someone who could just exist. He leaned back in the leather seat, the cushion groaning softly beneath him. His phone buzzed once in his pocket, a silent reminder that the world never stopped calling, but he didn't reach for it. Not tonight. He let his eyes drift upward toward the wooden beam, and as they disappeared into the green of the park, Daniel Carter, once just a name on magazine covers, finally knew who he was. Dad. And this was his new table. The steakhouse had become his hideout. No press here. No old friends trying to borrow time or money. Just ambient music and soft conversation around him. Other people's lives playing out quietly while he sat and listened. His mind wandered. He thought of his first apartment, a studio in Queens that smelled like laundry detergent and ramen. He remembered being 25, coding all night, burning out coffee makers faster than laptops. Back then, he had dreamed of this life, the suits, the cars, the respect. But no one had warned him how heavy it would feel when he finally got it. The door at the front opened briefly, and a gust of cold wind slipped inside. It carried with it a reminder, not just of winter, but of time. Time passing. Time that didn't care how wealthy you were. Daniel watched the hostess greet a new couple. Young, maybe mid-20s. They laughed as they handed over their coats. He couldn't help but notice the way they leaned into each other, like gravity pulled them closer, like they belonged to something he had lost along the way. A quiet sigh escaped him. He reached for his scotch again and let the liquid burn its slow trail down. Behind his calm exterior, behind the steady hands and successful reputation, lived a silence, one that even he struggled to name, a space in his chest that achievements didn't fill. He wasn't lonely. He just wasn't complete. Just as Daniel reached for his fork, the filet mignon, still steaming in front of him, the gentle clatter of silverware around the room, was interrupted by something unusual, the soft creak of the front door opening again, followed by hushed murmurs. It wasn't the kind of sound that normally turned heads in a place like Willow and Oak, but tonight it did. From the corner of his eye, Daniel noticed movement near the entrance. Not another suited guest or a couple in designer coats. This time, it was 3 children. They paused just past the door, blinking against the restaurant's soft lighting. Their faces carried a kind of hesitant determination. The kind kids wore when doing something they knew might get them in trouble, but mattered too much not to try. They looked completely out of place. Their clothes weren't torn, but clearly second-hand, jackets a bit too thin for the February cold, shoes that had seen too many sidewalks. No parents trailed behind them, no adult explanations or introductions. Waiters glanced over, uncertain. One manager stepped forward instinctively as if to guide them out, but stopped short when he saw them head straight toward the far corner, toward Daniel. Daniel, fork still in hand, looked up. The boys walked with small, quick steps. The oldest of the 3, perhaps 11 or 12, had a protective stance. The youngest, barely reaching Daniel's table height, kept staring at the ceiling in wonder, his eyes flickering across chandeliers and linen napkins like he'd never seen anything like it. But it was the middle boy, the one with curly hair and frayed cuffs, who led the group. He stepped forward, gripping a worn envelope in his small hand. Daniel furrowed his brow, completely thrown off. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It didn't feel like charity either. "Are you Daniel Carter?" the boy asked, voice steady despite the nerves showing in his clenched jaw. Daniel sat up straighter. "Yes, I am." The boy didn't flinch. He simply nodded once, then reached out and gently placed the envelope on the table, right next to Daniel's untouched glass. "Our sister said to give you this," he said. That was all. Daniel blinked, unsure how to respond. A flicker of confusion passed across his face. But before he could ask anything, who they were, what this was about, where their sister was, the moment dissolved. The kids turned on their heels and left. Not in a rush, but with the kind of swift retreat that said they didn't want to stay long enough for questions. The door opened again, and the cold air returned, chasing after them as they disappeared into the night. Daniel remained frozen, eyes still fixed on the envelope now, resting atop his linen napkin. Around him, the restaurant quietly resumed its rhythm. Forks clinked, wine glasses touched. Conversations picked up, but his table had shifted into silence. The fillet in front of him had already begun to cool. He reached out slowly, fingertips brushing the paper. It was soft at the edges, a little wrinkled. Not something just printed or fresh from a mailbox. Someone had handled it with care and purpose. The handwriting on the front was neat, deliberate. His name written in blue ink. No return address, no decoration. Just Daniel Carter. His heart beat louder now, thudding in his chest like it wanted answers before his mind could process the situation. Who was their sister? How did she know him? Why would kids come alone, delivering something like this? He looked toward the door again, half expecting to see them waiting. But they were gone. No car, no sign, just the envelope. He slid it closer, resisting the urge to tear it open immediately. For a long second, he just stared at it, as if the truth it carried might reveal itself through the paper. The room around him faded, the smell of the steak, the hum of jazz, the clinking dishes, none of it mattered, only the envelope, and the quiet voice of that boy, echoing in his mind, "Our sister said to give you this." Daniel sat still for what felt like minutes, his hand resting just beside. Slowly, as if peeling back a part of his life he didn't know was hidden, he opened the envelope. The flap made a soft tearing sound, barely audible but sharp in the stillness around him. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded once, creased with care. No perfume, no stamp, just the simplicity of truth waiting inside. He unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, yet unmistakably young. Blue ink, rounded letters, the kind of script that showed effort, like someone had rewritten it more than once, trying to get it just right. He began to read. "Dear Mr. Carter, you don't know me, but my name is Maya James. I'm 14, my mum's name was Leah James. She used to work at your company back in 2011. His eyes flicked back to the first line. Maya James. The name was unfamiliar, but the next one wasn't. Leah James. The name cracked something inside him, a shell he didn't realize he had wrapped around a memory. She always said you were kind to her, said you helped her through some tough times. She passed away 3 weeks ago from cancer." Daniel swallowed hard. A lump caught in his throat, rising with the weight of a past suddenly made real. Cancer. 3 weeks ago. She was gone. Before she died, she told me something I never knew. "You're my dad." The world stopped. He reread that sentence again and again. Each time the words struck differently, sharper, deeper, louder. The kind of sentence that rearranges the walls inside a man. "I don't want money or anything. I just wanted to meet you once. Maybe understand where I come from." He blinked, his breath catching slightly. The letter didn't ask. It offered. It didn't accuse. It revealed. "Those boys who gave you this, they're my little brothers. I'm taking care of them now." Daniel's eyes lifted for a moment, imagining the 3 small figures slipping out of the restaurant. His chest ached. She was just 14, taking care of 2 younger siblings. No safety net, no parents, just a letter and a courage he could hardly fathom. "If you're still reading, thank you. Maya." Daniel stared at the signature. The pen had pressed harder at the end, like she wasn't sure if she'd be heard. He folded the letter slowly, like it was something sacred, something fragile. His hand trembled just slightly as he placed it back on the table. Everything around him had faded. The clatter of forks, the quiet murmur of other diners, the polished elegance of willow and oak. It was all meaningless now. His mind had pulled him somewhere else entirely. Back to a time over a decade ago. A name, a face. Leah. They had spent some late nights working. They'd grown close. But she had left suddenly, moved back to Brooklyn, if he remembered correctly. There had been no drama, no anger, just distance. And now, after all that time, he had a daughter. A daughter who had written him, not to blame, not to demand, but simply to know. He whispered the name again, barely audible. Leah. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel Carter didn't feel powerful, or wealthy, or strategic. He just felt human. Daniel remained seated in that corner booth long after the plates were cleared, long after the check was discreetly placed on the edge of the table. He didn't touch it. His mind was elsewhere, sifting through memories that had long been boxed up and left in some unlit corner of his past. Leah. The name rang louder now, not just a word from the letter, but a woman who had once stood beside him in the earliest, most chaotic days of his career. He could still picture her in the cluttered office space they'd rented above a laundromat in Flatiron, mismatched desks, buzzing fluorescent lights, and coffee-stained notebooks stacked on every surface. Leah had shown up with no ego, just eagerness. She asked sharp questions. She listened more than she spoke. And when things fell apart, as they often did in a startup, she was the one who kept people calm. Back then, Daniel was all ambition and caffeine. He didn't sleep, didn't slow down. But Leah, she had this quiet rhythm about her, like she understood the value of both chaos and calm. They worked side by side through 2 a.m. debugging sessions, pitch deck disasters, and product launches that barely held together. Somewhere in all that mess, they had grown closer, not loud or dramatic, just a shared closeness, a quiet intimacy. There had been one night, a rooftop above their office, beer bottles between them, city lights stretching forever. That was the night he remembered most, when she had opened up about her mom, about growing up in a tight-knit Brooklyn neighborhood, about wanting stability. They'd shared more than just conversation that night. But life moved quickly, and when she left, quietly, respectfully, he'd assumed it was for a new job or a different opportunity. She'd given no reason, no confrontation, just a handshake, a warm goodbye, and the feeling that something unspoken had been left behind. He never knew, never imagined she had been carrying something so life-altering, so permanent, and now that truth had found him, not through lawyers or news headlines, but through a 14-year-old girl who asked for nothing but a chance to understand who she came from. Daniel leaned back in the booth, the leather groaning beneath him again, only this time it felt this was the hollow ache of regret, the kind that only comes when time reveals just how much you missed without ever realizing it. He imagined Maya reading the letter aloud to herself before sealing it, wondering if it was too much, if she'd said too little, if he would even care. He imagined the courage it took to send those boys in, to trust that a man she'd never met wouldn't turn them away. And now, he wondered, what had her life been like? Was Leah working 2 jobs while raising 3 kids? Had Maya spent her childhood in waiting rooms, watching her mother fight cancer day after day? Had birthdays gone quiet, bills gone unpaid? And Maya, this girl with his blood, had stepped into the world carrying far more than any child should. He rubbed his temple, feeling the weight settle deeper. He wasn't thinking about reputation or obligations. He was thinking about connection, about how fragile life was, about how many versions of his life had passed without him ever seeing them. He thought about the kind of father he could have been, the kind of father he still might be if Maya allowed it. Daniel stood up at last. He tucked the letter carefully into his coat as if it were a piece of glass. Then he turned and walked toward the door, heart pounding not with fear, but something else entirely, resolve. He didn't want to run from this. He wanted to know her, to know them. Not because of the past, but because of the future. Because in a world that had given him everything, this might be the one thing that finally gave him back himself. Daniel didn't waste time. By morning, he was making calls. Not to assistants or executives. He didn't want layers between him and what mattered now. He needed answers. Not from people he paid, but from the world that had quietly carried on without him. He went back to the envelope. On the back flap, nearly missed, was a faint pencil mark, a Brooklyn address scribbled by a child's hand. No apartment number, just a building and street. Bushwick. 3 subway transfers later, he stood in front of it. The structure was tired, chipped bricks, rusted fire escapes, graffiti curling up its side. A faint smell of dampness clung to the stairwell. It was the kind of place people survived, not lived. No doorman, no buzzers, just stairs that groaned with every step. He asked a neighbor if they knew Maya. A tired woman in a robe nodded toward the 2nd floor. She's the one with the little boys, keeps to herself. Daniel climbed. His heart thudded louder than his footsteps. He reached a door marked with peeling numbers. 2C. For a moment, he hesitated. His hand hovered, then finally made a gentle knock. Not sharp or commanding, just present. There was shuffling behind the door. She stood there, thinner than he imagined, in an oversized sweatshirt and leggings, her hair tied back hastily. But her eyes, those eyes stopped him. They were Leah's, but they were more than that. They were watchful, worn, brave. Neither of them spoke at first. The hallway buzzed with the hum of a distant TV from another unit. A baby cried somewhere down the hall. Finally, he said it. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." His voice was barely above a whisper. Not polished, not rehearsed, just honest. "I didn't know. But I want to be now, if you'll let me." Maya didn't blink, didn't speak, but she didn't close the door either. From behind her, 2 small faces peeked out. One held a toy missing its arm. The other clung to the hem of her shirt. Their eyes flicked between him and their sister, unsure whether to retreat or reach out. Still, she said nothing. Then, with a small inhale, like she was finally letting air back into her lungs, she stepped aside. He didn't enter fully, not yet. He respected the threshold. "I've been holding everything together," she finally said. Her voice cracked, but only a little. "But it's been hard." Daniel nodded, every word soaking into him like rain after drought. He wanted to say 100 things. That he admired her, that he was proud, that she was stronger than most adults he knew. Instead, he said the only thing that truly mattered: you don't have to do it alone anymore. For a second, silence. Then one of the little boys stepped forward. He was the curly-haired one from the restaurant. He looked up at Daniel, cautious, curious, then reached out and gently touched Daniel's hand with his small fingers. Not a handshake, just contact. Maya watched, arms still crossed, not in defiance, but in defense, the kind you build over years of doing everything on your own. But something in her posture softened. The weight she carried was still there, but now it had a crack in it, a place where hope could slip in. She opened the door fully. "Come in," she said, voice low. "We don't have much, but you can sit." Daniel stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the space. Sparse furniture, a drawing taped to the wall, a cracked mug on the counter. But it was warm. Not because of things, but because of them. And in that little apartment, surrounded by strangers who shared his blood, Daniel Carter took his first real breath in years. Not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a father. The sun filtered gently through the tree branches, casting a dappled light across the outdoor tables at a tucked-away brunch cafe on the edge of Central Park. Daniel sat there, not in a suit, not behind tinted car windows or beneath boardroom lights, just in a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, watching as syrup dripped off a wobbling tower of waffles in front of his youngest son. His son. The word still caught him off guard. Maya sat to his left, sipping tea. She was wearing a denim jacket and smiling, truly smiling, not the tight, guarded kind she'd worn the first few times they met. This was different. Real. The middle boy was telling a story about a turtle he saw on YouTube. The youngest kept interrupting. Daniel didn't mind. Every interruption, every messy napkin, every sticky hand that reached across the table, it was all part of a life he never knew he needed. This was his first Father's Day. Not as a guest, not as a distant relative, but as a dad. The role still felt raw in his hands, delicate, like something you protect, not control. But he had stepped into it with both feet, not because it was easy, but because it was right. He had rewritten everything: the trust documents, the estate plans, the apartment in Manhattan, gone. Too much glass and silence. They'd moved into a townhouse in Fort Greene, warm, walkable, and filled with sound. He kept a small home office, but rarely used it. His mornings began with cereal spills and sock hunts. His nights ended with bedtime stories and questions about the moon. Maya helped raise them all, but now she didn't have to do it alone. She was back in school, working toward a degree in early childhood education. Daniel paid her tuition, not as charity, but as investment in her, in them, in the future they were building. He didn't talk much about the past. He didn't need to. The future spoke louder. And right now, the future was saying, "Pass the whipped cream." He leaned across the table, adding a mountain of it to the youngest boy's plate. The child beamed. "Thanks, Dad." That word, Dad, hit with a weight and lightness all at once. He glanced at Maya. She looked at him and gave a small nod. That nod said everything. It said, "You showed up. You stayed. We see you." He reached for his glass of orange juice and raised it. "To messy pancakes," he said. The boys giggled. "To loud mornings," added Maya, grinning. "And to us," said Daniel. They clinked their glasses together, juice, milk, water. No champagne, no scotch, just them. The waiter passed by and paused. "Happy Father's Day," he said warmly. Daniel nodded, smiling. Not out of politeness, but because this time it meant something. As they gathered their things after brunch, backpacks, crayons, a forgotten napkin drawing, Daniel felt